Hi, I'm John.
This is Nick,
Andrew.
and welcome to JNA Podcast, everybody. This is episode 5. In this episode, we're going to be doing a little bit of a discussion on critical thinking and criticism. Brought to you by Mr. John. Quick question for you, John. What made you come up with this topic, and why is it important to you, young man?
Uh, Young man, I'm older than you.
Trying to
But
be respectful, okay, old fuck?
but
Imagine you act more immature.
the reason I decided to pick, criticism and critical thinking is one, I think it's a really useful or not school, skill. It's something that, I genuinely think we should be teaching in school and whatnot like that. And yeah, I've got a little spiel here, it's written that Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living, which is to say that a life that has not been thought about and attempted to be understood is one that's lacking value. And I would say the same is true of unexamined media, entertainment. There's a lot of value, I think, in trying to understand why something is good, why something made us feel a certain way, and, how whatever we're watching or playing or whatever managed to do that. And ultimately, criticism comes from a place of love and caring about something and, a genuine desire for it to be better. And I think the way that we can look at, media and stuff like that or it's transferable to how we look at our own lives and how we can, seek to improve ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. What is so important about criticism to you, though? And the reason why I say this, everybody, is because John was very excited to do this episode about
Oh,
criticism. Go figure. So, why is it that important to you, John?
Uh, because at the end of the day, it's a way of just expanding your own knowledge and wisdom, and really, it's a way of giving yourself a toolkit to think about something and go, okay, what is the best decision I can make here? You can do that with money, anything in life. That's it. Just what happens when we take logic and rationale and trying to apply it to something. And I think that's something the world is kind of lacking now. We're all very reactionary. It's all just sort of something happens and then there's public outcry. And I think maybe if we stopped and sat the fuck down and thought about something before we went, started shouting and bashing on our keyboards, the world would be a better place.
That's a good point you bring up, because nowadays, anytime you try to criticize anybody about, just trying to make them better or give some rational thought, you're racist, you're an idiot. They just start name calling you or whatnot, mainly because they don't want to be in the spotlight, or they don't want anybody, criticizing their beliefs or opinion. It's ridiculous half the time you talk to somebody and try to criticize them.
And I feel like they're attacked each and every time that you say something that disagrees with what they just said.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
and that's where that word trigger comes from. Is people feel so attacked, they get a new level of attacked, and it's called triggered.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I agree.
And they don't even talk about anything that you just discussed. They just want to go right to like attacking you as a person. You know what I mean? And it even happens on social media all the time. Like nobody even know you, know nothing about you. You literally post one sentence on social media that disagrees with what they believe, and they'll literally call you a piece of shit. You're gonna burn in hell, or etc. etc.
That's probably the worst place when it comes to that, by the way. Social media is just ridiculous when it comes to just stating your opinion, and somebody has a different opinion. You're just like the piece of shit of the world.
Yeah, and it's also, just kind of trying to counter the sort of tribalism that we've really kind of seemed to grown into. That's it. We're constantly trying to make people who disagree with us, whatever our stance is, et cetera, as the other, the enemy, and nah, we're all people, dude.
Right? Good point. So there are different types of criticism, for that matter, and
Mm.
there is criticism that can be taken very negatively, and then there's criticism that is very positive. Which one do you kind of lean toward, John, when it comes to the different kinds of criticism?
Uh, I tend to talk more, I guess, negative criticism, as in, thing is bad, more than, I talk about things that are good. And part of that is just because I'm a snarky asshole, and let's face it, shitting on something
Sure.
is always going to be fun.
Sure, everybody is completely shocked right now.
Yeah, I know. But
Everybody is. What
like,
about you, Andrew? What type of criticism do you typically, give out and just kind of lean toward in that matter?
Oh man, I would like to think that I try to even myself out as much as I can. I mean, I'd like if you don't criticize things enough, then you're just gonna like everything, and if you don't, you know what I mean. So like, I try to criticize things as much as possible without sounding like a snarky asshole.
So John's the polar opposite. Okay, got it. Okay.
Well, how about you, Nick? I'm thinking Nick was probably more along the lines the same way, huh?
I am to a point. I like trying to be like positive in that matter. Especially when you're given, I should say nowadays, when you're given criticism nowadays, people just take it so wrong. For example, what I do for a living, I'm in sales, and if you know anything about sales, it's an evolving thing. It's always changing. People have different trust issues. People have different objections. So, it's an evolving thing. It's a constant training thing, and new guys come in and out, and you give your opinion, and they take it wrong. So you got to kind of give it in a way that's more positive. Like, look, I'm here to help you, not hurt you, but you suck doing it that way. If that makes sense. So I guess it's a kind of a combination of positive and negative. Tell them, what they're doing is kind of wrong, and this is why it's wrong. But hey, we're here to help you, not hurt you.
Exactly. And like, it's been a failing of mine that I do tend to be completely negative, and it is something I do try and work on because there's no value, honestly, and just completely ripping something apart uh, without, trying to point out, things that are good, because there has to be enough in whatever you're criticizing, even if it's, your job or something. There's got to be enough to make you give a shit. If you don't give a shit, you don't criticize.
You just don't care to.
Exactly. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're spending more effort on something than may not be necessary because that's it. You give a fuck.
Now, that is very true. Even in my line of work, man, I tell people to try to be like as much as a perfectionist as you possibly can be. Because when you're dealing with carpentry, man, a lot of times you're dealing with like 16th of an inch. So there's a difference between eighth of an inch, and the whole entire job could be fucked because of that. You have to be a perfectionist, and if you're not, you're just not going to notice all those mistakes that you're doing because you're just not giving a shit.
Carpentry has to be that one job where you really have to take criticism because of how intricate it is and tedious that it is. Like Andrew was saying, I mean, there is a difference between an eighth of an inch and a quarter, et cetera, and a 16th and stuff like that, to where it could really fuck up a whole job and cost a lot of money doing that. So that is a job that requires more criticism than a lot of others, I would say.
That's or at least applied to media. That's it. It's just a genuine desire to want something to be better in, something like carpentry or factory work or something. It's one of those things. That's it. It can cost you money, but like kind of focused a little bit more on entertainment in my mind, because y'all have been calling me a picky bastard for God knows how long. So, but that's it. It always comes from a place of love and caring, and I think also a lot of media nowadays is very popcorny. Like, you fucking go through it, and then you don't give it any more thought. You're on to the next show, on to the next show, always trying to find something new. And we need to slow down a little bit, I think, just gain some appreciation for things too.
I do think there's a difference, and the reason why we call you picky is because, well, you kind of are. I'm sorry to say it that way, but I mean, there is a big difference between criticizing and pointing out every single flaw you see. Some things don't require that. Some things are just as good as the way they are. Now, you can also say there's a flaw in everything you can think of or see.
Yeah.
Flaws in everything. So to be a nitpicker is different than being criticized. And we fuck with John all the time about him being picky. It's just, ongoing joke. But yeah, there is a big difference between the two.
It's my joke.
Yeah. But I guess, at what point do you draw the line between being thorough and being nitpicky? And it's also worth saying that, if I give enough of a fuck to go be to sorry, viewers, listeners, if I give enough of a fuck to be able to point out all of these each individual things, it's because I was so far along for the ride that it's just, I've been exposed to this so many goddamn times.
I can see your point. Go ahead, Andrew.
I mean, like, where do you draw the line, though? I mean, like, do you, like, walk up to the Mona Lisa and been like, meh, those paint strokes could have been a little bit more fluent? You know what I mean? Like, where is the line for you? Is there something that even you appreciate as is? Like, you don't even, like, notice the flaws in it or anything like that?
It's not that I...
John. It's a good question, John.
It's not that okay, like, you must accept that every work is flawed. That is a simple principle of just criticism and honestly of critical thinking. There is nothing perfect. It's just, is it egregious to point out those flaws instead? Let's say, even if I point them out, it doesn't diminish it or bring it down or make me enjoy it less. It's just one of those things I pointed out because hey, someone might learn from it, or it's a way of opening up discussion about that. And that's another thing criticism is too, is it's just, that's it, a way of talking about something.
An icebreaker, give or take.
Yeah.
Okay, I could see your point. That's a good point to make.
I know if I'm standing next to the Mona Lisa and some dude walks up like, man, those paint brushes suck, I'm gonna be like, my very first thought I was gonna be like, this dude's a jackass. Like, it's the Mona Lisa, bro. Like, there's some things you just gotta take as is, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Some things you're never gonna reach a point where it's 100% flawless, but we can be a damn near close.
That's actually something worth pointing out, is that when you criticize something, we've already been over the fact that you do have to give a fuck about it, but it's because you love something in spite of its flaws, not, or rather, you love something because of its flaws, not necessarily in spite of it. And that's it. I can sit here and say, okay, this isn't perfect, that's not perfect. And like Nick said, it's an icebreaker about, being able to talk about it. But at the same time, it's also a way of talking about, okay, what could have been done, and that's it. It's all about discussion and trying to learn, kind of like what we're doing here.
Yeah, I feel that. Like, I can always, like, appreciate just trying to get better as the last time. You know what I mean? That's how we've gotten here as human beings. That's how we've gotten so far. It's because of that. You know what I mean? Like, somebody will invent something like a dishwasher or whatever, and we'll look at it and be like, that could be better, and make it better. And we keep going like that to where you get the digital dishwashers we got now. You know what I mean?
That's a good point. That's a very good point, that you can appreciate something and still criticize it, not necessarily downing it or being that negative, but just trying to improve. That's a good point.
There's something I'd actually like to bring up, slightly paraphrasing, but in the words of the great philosopher Tupac Shakur, not everybody who says bad things about you is a hater. Some of them just really want to see you do better in life.
I dig that. Tupac, man, gotta love him.
Dude was a philosopher. I mean, say what you will about anything else, but the dude was just very, very intelligent.
Wasn't dumb by any means, man. I love it. Like, I love his poetry and shit.
That's it. It's beautiful.
Absolutely.
So again, back to my question though, like, is there anything that even you look at and you're just like, I'm not even gonna criticize it. I'm just gonna take that as it because it's so good.
No, honestly, no.
Well, I would assume that there's moments to criticize and moments not to. Correct. I would assume that you're not first glance at seeing something. Oh, that sucks. It's got a a rip right there or a crinkle right there. Blah blah blah. There is a moment to actually criticize something and think that way more or less than it is just to dive right into it. Would you agree?
Yeah, and that actually, there are certain gimmies, for lack of a better word, when it comes to criticizing anything. Talking about video games, because that's what I know the most. There are certain things you can't criticize about, like games from the NES era or the Sega Genesis or Super Nintendo, because technical limitations were a thing. You can't criticize a game for having shitty graphics when the most you could afford for graphics was half a megabyte. There are certain.
Well, that's
things...
a good point. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
There are certain things that you just accept because there's no to do or to criticize that aspect would be basically trying to violate the laws of physics for that thing. Like that's
Well,
it. There are gimmies, I guess.
here's a good point, though. I mean, back then, for example, you talk about the graphics. I mean, back then we thought the graphics were fine because we didn't
Oh
really
yeah.
know better. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? So criticizing over time would be a better way to put that because nowadays everything you could see a pimple on a guy's forehead with HD and you know what I mean, all the technology
Yeah.
they have the picture itself nowadays. So it's easy to criticize councils. Like we said this on a podcast earlier about movies, like Freddy Krueger movies and Jason movies. All of their classics. They're awesome. Everybody knows them and loves them. But you watch them nowadays, it's basically you see the strings on the guy. Not
Yeah.
really, but you get my point. It's just corny as hell, you know.
And that is a lens with which you have to apply to criticism is that especially for things like movies and stuff, especially comedy, is that no piece of media is separate from the time that it was made. Like there are technical limitations, that's, what was scary or funny or good back when the piece was made may not be the same thing now. And like when we try and talk about classics, you things are classic because they still manage to endure rather than, are brought down by those technical limitations.
It's like 80s horror movies.
Mm, like
Yeah, go back and watch an 80s horror movie now, man. And it's some of the most corniest shit you'll ever see in your entire life, but I love every minute of it.
Terrible. Terrible.
And,
like
one thing's still universal. Chucky's still funny as hell.
uh
Chucky had a good mix of horror and just comedy, depending on who you are and what you see funny. It depends on your sense of humor, I guess. But that's something you could put up with just because it has it's multi-dimensional when it comes to movies. You know what I mean? It has a
right.
bit of both worlds.
Well, go ahead.
You all right there, buddy?
Yeah.
I bet you, John. I bet you go back and watch like the '80s horror movies and have like an aneurysm with all the criticism that you think of when you're watching that movie. Those kind of movies.
Not really, no, because that's it. It's a product of their times. Now, yes, there are things that I could point out and kind of dig at, but at the same time, like valid criticism has to take that into account. Like, just like as a horror movie for Freddy Krueger, okay, we can sit here and we can talk about, the dialogue being corny and stuff like that. But at the same time, it was a product of its time. That's what was scary to audiences back then. And if we take a step back and approach the concept of it, a serial killer that kills people through their dreams when you're asleep, that's fucking scary. Like, if
Well,
you
that'll
did
always be scary.
exactly,
That'll never die down. Never die down.
like if you were to do Freddy Krueger in the modern day, actually do Freddy Krueger, kind of like how they did It. They did another version of It. Speaking, of course, of the movie and the Stephen King novel. And really, all they did is that they just gave it a facelift. They updated it for modern times. It's still, Crazy Cannibal Clown.
Put a lot more things that were in the book in the movie too, though. Like it was different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, though. I think that might be one of the reasons why scary movies in general are taking like a huge hit and aren't as good as they used to be because they're relying on special effects too much instead of like more on the imagination kind of thing.
Yeah. There's a saying that it's not directly relatable to criticism, but it's that limitations breed creativity. Now, if you want to freak the fuck out of somebody and all you've got is, simple prosthesis, wires, shit like that, you have to try and find a way. Uh, Case in point, for Alfred Hitchcock, when he did Psycho, that iconic scene everybody knows of the blood, swirling down the drain. In black and white, you couldn't tell what it was. You know what it was? Hershey's syrup. In order to get, the consistency of blood circling down the drain, he poured Hershey's syrup and shot it, as in at the camera. But that's it. It's a limitation that bred creativity, and it gave him, the ability to get what he was trying to go after, in spite of the fact that he couldn't have something like photorealistic or a good blood analog or something.
I can dig that, man. Like the less that you have, the more you need to work with it. You know what I mean, kind of thing. Yeah, I could dig that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I could tell you one thing. I don't think me and Nick have ever seen the original Psycho. Movie's so old, man. That's from like 1948 or some shit, ain't it?
It's a long time. I actually don't have the date
Yeah,
right off the top of my head, but that's it. And criticism would have been, something that's it. That particular scene would have been talked about, and to talk about, understanding why something was good or why something made us feel a particular way, I feel is of merit not only when it comes to media and stuff like that, but also in our day-to-day lives. Why did that make me angry? Why did that make me sad? Why did that make me happy? Understanding these things is living an examined life. It's doing what Socrates said to fucking do. And the dude was pretty smart.
yeah. I can understand that, and I think a lot of people could benefit from thinking like that. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people could need to look at themselves like that, no matter which side of the tribe they're in. Like especially when it comes to political, man, the people they kind of blow me away with how biased they become in their political right or left. You know what I mean? Like if somebody's on the right side, if somebody's on the leaning towards the right, like automatically they have to dismiss weather change and they have to like support Obama and be against abortion. If somebody's on the left, automatically they have to like shove the like climate control down down your throat and automatically vote like Obama was the best president. Like you can't. It's sad that we can't really you can't be in between nowadays. You know what I mean? Like even if you're not even having a discussion politically, say if you're just having a discussion about climate change, like yes, we need to bring awareness towards climate change. As soon as you say that, 90% of the people are immediately going to think you're a liberal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's true. And in the same sense, though, if anything calls for criticism or critical thinking, it would be politics. Yeah, and I mean that's how you bring things together, and that's how you create things that are good, is by coming up with different things, criticizing this, criticizing that, and kind of coming up with just different ideas that could make the country or world better. You know what I mean? I would that politics would be one of those categories that would require critical thinking and or criticism, right?
Most definitely. Criticism is it's the stone in which we polish the gems, if you will.
Right.
Oh, I think critical thinking is definitely something that people should learn about more when it comes to like anything, like like we're saying with all this the political things. People get one-sided and other things like that. I mean, yeah, it's healthy to like not only criticize the other side, but it's healthy to look at your side objectively too. You know what I mean? You can't just sit there and like point fingers all the time and like criticize that. Sometimes you need to do that to yourself.
And that's part of why I wanted to tackle this topic now too, is because what with the coronavirus going on, and everybody's decisions are under scrutiny and they are being criticized, and I think sometimes they're being criticized a little bit unfairly. I would like to not make this too political, but there's an interesting parallel. We recently had protests up here in Michigan about what the governor's. Now, we're under some pretty strict restrictions up here in Michigan. I'm not going to lie. I do think that they're completely necessary, but Ohio, which is right under us, is under even stricter restrictions on us. But the Ohio governor isn't getting quite nearly as much hate nor as much heat, to my knowledge, strictly because, and a lot of people are saying it's because the Michigan governor is a Democrat and a woman in today's political climate.
That's retarded.
It is.
Is Ohio's governor a Republican?
Yes, a Republican male.
Wow.
And that's a good point you bring up. When it comes to the restrictions, I mean, New York City, from what I know, has the worst restrictions overall in the country, and a lot of people are trying to base it off New York City, and it's hard to say or agree to that because, first of all, you don't have many cities with that many people in one city. You know what I mean? So it's hard to just use New York City, and a lot of people use this as an argument that we should, replicate what New York's doing, and it's like, no. I mean, Ohio, don't get me wrong, it's got some pretty big cities there, but nothing compared to New York City, you know what I mean? So restrictions should be different per state, I believe. And especially you got your states like Wyoming or Iowa or Idaho, they're social distancing already, just
just being around.
You know what I mean? Exactly. Even going to the grocery store, you're social distancing. You know what I mean? It's just not the same everywhere. So you could agree or disagree. There's a good point on both ends of that, to the fact that, this is, from what I know, it's not getting any better. The numbers are still going through the roof. So there's got to be a point where you got to stop it or let everybody go back to work. You really can't have a happy middle there because of, circumstances like New York and Idaho. I mean, how do you do the same restrictions for both of those states? They're just night and day different. You know what I mean? So there's got to be a happy medium there.
But I guess to try and get back more on topic, that's it. We do need to think about, we need to apply critical thinking to the policies that are implemented and the big actors, if you will, how they're doing things and, what their motivations and stuff like that might be. And even if, we're in their camp, for lack of a better term, I guess that's it, to use politics. I don't agree with everything that the Michigan governor is doing, even though I did vote for her and will continue to vote for her the next time she comes up.
Okay, I never knew you actually voted for her. That's probably a different podcast to go over. But
yeah, that's a whole other fucking subject. But at the same time, that's it. She's in my camp, for lack of a better term, but I don't agree with everything she's doing. But that doesn't necessarily, that doesn't burn the bridge. That doesn't, detract from the overall good that she has done. And there are things that that were in her campaign to be elected as governor that she has not followed up on. But by the same token, that's it. It's accepting the good with the bad.
Well, you're never going to agree 100% with anybody when it comes to politics. I don't think anybody ever would. So it's trying to pick and choose their ideas and if it matches with yours and what your ideas are, etc. I mean, it's hard to find somebody that you're 100% going to agree with every idea they have. You know what I mean?
I don't. Like, even with candidates I've supported in the past, I don't agree 100% with every single one of their policies that they say. But at the same time, you just got to take what you can. You know what I mean?
Good with the bad.
Excuse me. And you have to try and take things on their own merits. And that is a big part of criticism too, is that's it, okay, let me examine something in of itself, not informed by anything else, but also using everything else as a reference. Why was X movie good? Let's use an easy example. The first Avengers movie. Why was that good? Because camera work was good, plot was good, pacing was good. And you can dig into each individual moments, but that is also the subject of criticism. That's it. Why did this movie sell fucking gangbuster?
Yeah.
Your idea of good.
Oh, do I smell some shade being thrown?
Nah. I don't feel like getting attacked online, so I'm just gonna let that one be for now.
Ooh.
Speak openly, Andrew. Speak openly, sir.
I know it's all right, man. I thought the first Avengers movie was alright. I didn't think it was all that. That's just my opinion. I know that the MCU comes out with better movies after the Avengers, but I don't know. I thought it was alright at best.
Wow. Okay. I thought it was good. I mean, I like good graphics and good action and stuff, especially nowadays with technology. That's kind of what I look for in movies anymore.
Right.
Outside of comedy or horror, I should say. But yeah, I thought it was really good. It could have been better. Yeah, I guess it could have been. There's things they could have made better on it, but I like all the Avenger movies. I like them all. I
guess I was at a disadvantage because I read the comics first. I guess I don't know. Like, That's another thing when people get tribal with, man. It's like online comic books. You know, when people like they never look if they're either a DCU fanboy or a fucking MCU fanboy. People can't be in between on that shit. Same exact thing. They can't look at a movie like they can't criticize a movie like the Avengers because the MCU is all that and everybody loves Robert Downey Jr. If you criticize it like anything like that online, dude, you just get attacked.
Well, that comes to the point we were making earlier that criticism nowadays is taken like so negatively. It's people just see it as a source of you attacking them more or less. It's some just stating an opinion or trying to improve something. It's more along the lines of, oh, you don't like what I like? Screw you. You're an asshole. You know what I mean? Nowadays it's a little ridiculous.
My defense, it usually is like that for other people. They usually are the assholes. Just saying.
Well, to those other people, you are the asshole.
Oh, who cares what they think, man? We're talking about me over here.
All eyes on Andrew.
Egotism.
That's funny. But seriously, I mean, we could all use criticism to improve ourselves. I mean, nobody's 100% where they need to be or where they want to be, I would assume. So it doesn't hurt to be criticized at all, one way, shape, or form. All it does is, strikes your attention and makes you, think about what you're doing and how you can improve that particular topic or whatever, And by the way, it's hard for me to take criticism, especially when you think you're good at something or you've mastered a craft. It's really hard to accept that somebody came up with something better or something that's just more evolving than your idea or your opinion. Yeah, it is kind of hard to accept some things, but I guess it's hard to accept based on the way they say it. For example, I mean, you can criticize somebody in a way that just talks down to them more than it is actually trying to improve them. Your intentions might be pure, but the way you said it sounds like you're just completely dogging them. You know what I
mean? We actually just had that little spat, and which, I mean, the listeners, they don't know about that, but I do apologize for that again.
You're fine.
Thanks, man. But it's worth pointing out that, and this goes into critical thinking, how is a person saying something? Am I just saying, oh, you're complete shit at this, you shouldn't even bother, what you need to do is X, Y, and Z, and that's the only way you're going to get it right? Or am I saying, okay, this is kind of bad, this is something outside your skill set, this is something, X, Y, and Z. Am I calling you a stupid asshole? Am I belittling you for not being able to do something? Or am I telling you, listen, this part is, it's in the presentation as well too. Like, I mentioned being a snarky bastard and saying, or, just saying this thing's shitty or that thing's shitty, so on and so to the third. But at the same time, whenever I'm trying to make a good, reasonable argument and not just shitting on something for the sheer joy of shitting on something, which I understand makes me a terrible person, but we'll put that, on the shelf for now.
I chalk it up to creatures of habit. If you're used to doing something over and over again the same way, it's hard to break that. You know what I mean?
And that's it. Any kind of criticism can be taken as, no, you're doing it wrong.
Well, there's a difference between saying you're doing it wrong and here's how to do it, other than you're an asshole and here's why. You know what I mean? There's a fine line of that. And by the way, some people say it's nitpicky, or you got to walk on eggshells anytime you try to tell somebody something in that matter. But it's like there is a way to give criticism in a manner that is. I'm not sure. And by the way, this has nothing. I didn't bring this up because of the other day. Nothing to do with it.
No.
It's just a topic, but there is a way to approach it that makes it more of a, we're both on the same level. I don't mean intelligently or anything like that. I mean, as a person, as a human being, we're on the same level, but because I know this, I'm sharing my idea with you and it could improve what you're doing.
All right.
Everyone's a critic. That part's true, man. Like I think that seems to be the most well-versed part of the English language is criticism, because people like to do it so easily. Does not matter what the other person is doing. It could be basketball, football, it could be a mayor, a governor, president. It does not matter. Like everybody, there's always going to be those people who are sitting in the background pointing out what the person's doing wrong, even though they're doing 90% of it right.
Yeah. People always look at the flaws more than they look at the success.
Yep.
To give a quote from Futurama, man, if you do something right, people will be unsure if you did anything at all.
Yeah.
Yep. Amen to that. And by the way, sports is another thing that really calls for criticism more than a lot of other categories. I mean, think about it. You got 32 teams in basketball, 32 teams in football. Only one wins a championship. So all other 31 teams, they can take criticism because they didn't do what they needed to do, right?
That's
So
one way
they're
of looking at it.
So, sports, especially in sports, politics, and, even acting, I would say, and there's a lot of topics that come with it. Sales, there's a lot of different topics or categories that you can bring in discussion when it comes to what requires more criticism than the other. And sports would require, I would think, it'd be probably at the top, because sports is that thing that anybody can really improve on. Now, can anybody perfect that? Absolutely not. Nobody can drain every single shot they step up to the 3-point line. Not everybody can throw a 60-yard touchdown pass every time he throws the ball. Not everybody can hit a home run every time he's up at the plate. You know what I mean? It's just impossible to do it that way. And if you do, good for you. But the point is there's sports require criticism, because that's how you're going to be able to improve your game to the best level you can.
Yeah, there's no lying in sports neither, man, because you can't go out there like, oh, I'm the shit, and then you go up for a layup and get blocked, and you're not going to be like, oh, I'm still the shit. You're going to realize, hey, there's some things about myself I need to work on before I can become the shit,
Sports is a humbling thing. I mean, you can very confident, and next thing you know, someone can just block the shit out of you, or strike you out, or whatever, and then it just brings you back to reality. Golf is that sport, by the way, that more than others, I believe, because golf is that game, man. You could hit 3, 4, 5 good shots in a row, make a birdie, make this, make that. You feeling really good, and then shank a shot, and you feel like shit. Or miss the ball as you swing, and you're like, oh shit.
Die.
Never gets old. But golf will just get you to thinking that you're giving the worst criticism out of yourself, man. You're gonna walk out of the golf course like, man, I really was. My head was high today before I started at 18 rounds, but not anymore. Now it's just gonna swing low, sweet cherry, and I'm depressed because I suck at golf.
Yeah, golf is definitely one of those games that you could do good or decent, and you feel very confident, and then a couple shots go bad, and your whole confident level just gets diminished. You know what I mean? It's one of those sports. Unlike basketball, where you miss a shot, you don't feel that bad. You miss 2, 3 in a row, you really don't feel that bad. But golf is one of those sports that it's more in the limelight than others. If you shank a shot and it goes right into the water, I'm sorry, but there is no coming back from that. You know what I mean? Yeah, you miss a shot, okay, you get a rebound, you make it again, good for you. Golf, it doesn't work that way.
I would say what you guys aren't talking about specifically is criticism, but what you could apply to or criticism to is, okay, why did I shank that shot? Same thing with basketball. Why did this shot, not make it? Was it, the way I threw it? Was it, from the way I approached the shot? Was it just because I didn't notice there was somebody right down there over by the net who could have made made the block?
Oh yeah.
That's it. It's in that way you improve something.
You can always criticize the mechanics of it. That's what comes down to. The mechanics of basketball, football, hockey, no matter what sport you think of, you can always criticize, because nobody is perfect. And you can't be in sports. It's impossible. It's just physically impossible to be perfect in sports. I don't care what sport you're playing. So the mechanics of it, when you say, why'd I miss a shot? It's the mechanics of it. You release correctly. Your elbow wasn't tucked in. You weren't looking at the rim. You were, just glanced somewhere else. Whatever the case may have been. You let it roll off your palm instead of your fingers. The mechanics of it is what really needs to be criticized, especially in sports.
That's it.
You need to be able to take it from other people too, because you're not going to notice yourself doing it. It's like one of the biggest things in sports. Like, it might feel right to you, but just because it feels right does not mean it is right. You got to be able to take criticism from other people to learn about your own game.
Absolutely.
And that's actually something worth pointing out. You guys, or anybody who's ever watched a TV show or something, has seen the words executive producer. Do you know what their job really kind of is?
Basically like the vice president. Not really that much, just a face. That's what I would say. That's my guess, by the way. I don't know.
Nope.
Job is basically just make phone calls or promote the show or whatever, ain't it?
that is part of their job, but one thing that they do is that they are almost completely disconnected from the actual production of something. And we brought this up earlier that, if you've been doing for something so long, you think you've got it. And you need somebody else's eye, somebody who isn't quite as invested or who hasn't been a part of something to really look in and or to step in and look at it from a completely unbiased perspective.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
Like, there's a lot or I guess there's a lot you can say about, a way something was approached, in terms of production, and you'll absolutely love it. Like, there are songs that I played back in high school. I was a band kid, go figure. Um, that I absolutely adore, and it's only because that's it. I spent months learning how to do it. And whether or not it's actually a good piece, whether or not we actually, performed well or anything, uh, that's something somebody else has to tell me, because that's it. The only thing I am so balls deep in it, I'm kind of blinded to that.
Hey, John, how many stories do you have that start with this one time at band camp?
Uh,
Got one or two. That's all you really need right there.
If anybody doesn't know where that reference comes from, it comes from, okay?
yeah, American Pie.
It's funny.
I kind of wish I went to band camp just so I could say that line.
Funny.
John, do you yourself have tips to help people think about things critically? Is there a way that you tackle it to make sure that you're not being biased in your own opinion?
The biggest advice I would say for anything is slow the fuck down. Like, okay, yes, have your initial reaction, live in the moment, but then go back and try and understand why. Um, and I would say the biggest thing to check your own bias is try and look at it from another person's perspective. Try to detach yourself and see, okay, why did I think this was a good decision at the time? What ended up happening was that, a universally positive result. Did, I and or others benefit from me doing it this way?
Mm-hmm.
Walk a mile in someone else's shoes.
Yeah, that's some good advice there, because I know from myself personally, if I ever see anything that I think is like clickbaity online or whatever, and even if it's something that I want to believe, or a headline or what the however, I generally set out to try to disprove that idea or
Mm,
whatever it was that I seen, and if by the end of the day or whatever, if once I'm done with it, like if I cannot disprove it to being wrong, then it was probably right. You know what I mean? I try to do that with no matter what side of the coin I'm looking at, you know what I mean? Because I do dance around when it comes to politically, like left or right or whatever. So, like I tend to dance around. So if I hear something like slashes this one political person I didn't like, let me go out there and try to disprove that. They can't disprove it, okay? Then it probably happened.
coincidentally, that is how scientists do things. After somebody presents a proof, part of the peer review is one, seeing if the methodology actually works. The way they said we did this in the paper actually happens, but they're also trying to uh, disprove something. Like, I can't remember it exactly, but science starts with reality and tries to disprove why something happened by doing it every other way. Whereas something like pseudoscience starts with reality and then tries to justify it. Freud was a good example. Everything was mothers and dicks.
Okay. So basically, it's different studies trying to prove something right or wrong, is what you're saying. I could dig that.
I know there's a lot of pseudoscientists out there that I know for fact. Like, I want this to be true. Let me do it. Think of every excuse to justify this for to be true. As that happens a lot.
That's funny. So, John, let me ask you a question. I should say, what category or topic is it most useful for criticism in time?
Now, frankly, that's it. I think it's something that's universally applicable. I don't think that, there's one thing or category that is universally either more or deserving or criticism is more important in, because that's it. Criticism is just something. That's it. It's slowing down and really thinking about something. Now that can be, your favorite video game or movie or song, or it could be while you're in a relationship at this point in time.
Okay. So basically, what you're saying is there's nothing that's more important than anything else. Criticism basically applies to anything that you're doing to that aspect universally.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand. What about you, Andrew? Do you have a certain thing that you think would require more criticism than others, or do you think it's, like John said, universal?
Basically universal. Like I think people do it a lot more often than that they admit. I don't think people really notice them doing it themselves. I know for a fact sometimes I've even been called like I bitch a lot. You know what I mean? I don't even notice myself doing it, but I tend to look at the negative side of things and things I don't want to see the positive side of things too. You know what I mean? So I think it's healthy for anybody to try to tackle that within themselves and not try to be biased, man. It's so hard not to be biased. Like I think it sounds easy when you say it, like, oh, don't like I'm never biased. Like, yeah, you are. As soon as I hear somebody say I'm not biased, I'm gonna be like, yeah, you're biased, motherfucker. I know you are. It's hard not to.
Right.
Like you're really no. I swear to God, it really is hard not to be. You really, especially once you notice it within yourself and like you do it with. It's like almost like second nature. Like you do it subconsciously. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's weird.
Well, to an extent, everybody's somewhat biased. I mean, to an extent, you know what I mean? I guess that comes with human nature. You know what I mean? For example, I mean, if someone says, something against you, just the fact that you're my brother, I'm going to take your side. You know what I mean? It's just anything or anybody, I should say, can be biased to a certain degree. Looking at something objectively is one thing, but whether you did right or wrong, I still got your back. Wow. And so, and I'm sure you can apply that to many other things than just that, but you get my point.
On the subject of biases, nothing that we have ever done in life is not informed by everything else we've done in life. I can sit here and talk about why I like a particular something and, explain why it's good and stuff like that, but that's always going to be coming from me. It's relating to every other thing I've ever done or anything within this particular field.
I understand. Well, that just points, a good point that, everything has their flaws. And if you really want to be that of a nitpicker, and again, I'm not calling you that, but, the shoe fits, John.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can find flaws in anything. You know what I mean? That's a simple fact. Find flaws in anything you could think of. So there comes a point where you just got to take things for what they are. You know what I mean?
That's my question. Is just like basically where do you draw the line? You know what I mean? Because if you just sit there going through life and just noticing the holes in each and everything you ever see, that you're going to have like a very negative ass life. Like sometimes you just got to be positive and just appreciate things for what they are. You know what I mean?
For example, John, I would assume you're not going to sit there and criticize sex. You know what I mean? If you're in the middle of having sex, are you really going to stop and say you could be doing this better? Or this, you know what I mean? So I think the line draws right there, right or wrong?
I would argue. Yes, we're doing this.
Only you would. Only you would.
That's okay. Like Jim Carrey from Liar Liar right there. Like, oh, that was amazing. He's like, I had better.
I would contend on the subject of sex that I can tell you, okay, you being the eponymous female, I can say, what would feel better, what is something I enjoy more, and I would say that a woman can do the same thing. In fact, one criticism of dudes that I've seen women have is that we don't know what the fuck we're doing when it comes to sex. Well, because that's it. Women don't talk about that shit. They really don't. And I figure
they talk about it just,
huh?
They talk about it just when you're not around.
Exactly. Well, that's it. They're criticizing, but they're not relaying that criticism to the people who need it most. And I would definitely argue that if it meant, as a female, you're giving it up more to the dude, we would all be receptive a little bit of criticism because that's it. you're giving it up more.
You know what he said right there, Nick, is that it's okay for women to criticize. It's just not cool for the dudes to do it. That's what I got out of it.
No, I would say the same is true
I
of
think
men.
they would
Like
agree
nobody
with you.
wants to fuck a dead fish.
But you still would.
And I think like 60% of dudes out there still would.
Absolutely, if not more.
Might even be lowballing it right there.
Yeah, well, I mean, if it meant getting off, and that's it. You can appreciate that you've been given the chance to get the spunk out, but you can also be like, okay, that wasn't good, nailed her, didn't really do anything, 3 out of 5 pumps.
I'm gonna give you a 5.6 out of 10. You can do better next time.
Excuse me.
Could you imagine that? Like, soon as you're finished, like, that's about 4.7.
I've had three other better people this year.
You're in my top 10.
I think it was Chris Rock who made the joke, women can't regress financially, men can't regress sexually. If your boyfriend wants you to do some really fucked up shit, you need to talk to the chick he was with before you. Because if you take a woman and you just have sex, okay, it'll be all right. But you get the right woman with the right clothes, wearing the right makeup, doing all of the sexual acts that you want. There's the difference between just hitting the bottom of the ketchup bottle, but you do all the shit right, that dude will come like a civil rights movement.
Hit the bottom of a ketchup bottle.
Just
that's the reference I was laughing at too, by the way.
That's what I heard out of all
that. I get it, John. So basically, back to Andrew's question or point, there is no line that you go by. There is no line that you can say, okay, here's where I draw the line. I don't need to criticize this. It's basically anything's up for grabs. Anything that you see or do on an everyday basis is basically something that you would or will criticize, correct?
More or
not
less.
saying it's a bad thing.
But, okay, we keep talking about this line, and, like, I don't quite understand the concept of it, to be completely honest. Like, why should I?
What I meant was, is there got to be some point in time that you're just like, some things are so good enough as is that you don't have to criticize it. That's what I'm saying. There's got to be like once in a while, life just gives you that kind of thing, such as like you go outside and you watch the sunrise. You know what I mean? It looks beautiful. You're not going to be like, son, you could do it a little better this morning. You know what I mean? I'll expect better out of you tomorrow.
Well, I mean that's a natural phenomenon. Criticism, is always kind of focused on human events. Yes, the sunshine or the sunrise is beautiful, but there's no way of controlling that. There's no way I can tell the sunrise to be better that doesn't violate the laws of physics.
Okay, so that's a bad example. Here's an example for you, John. Like, you go see for example, the pyramids. Are you going to walk and say, oh, that's shitty labor work? Or are you going to just appreciate it for what it is?
Well, I mean, that's also a bad example because the labor that was done on the pyramids is reflective of the fact that it was a religious duty. It's beyond reproach, Like,
we're just setting him up with the most impossible examples just so he could say that we're right.
More.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to do right here now.
I can criticize your questions in here. Like,
I don't doubt that.
Okay, I'm gonna do the bad critic thing and talk about food without being actually a food critic. Well, okay, you know what? That didn't work. Anyway,
I feel like you'd be a natural food critic.
Okay, let's say, I cook myself some chicken and waffles, and it is the best goddamn chicken and waffles that I have ever made. The waffles are crispy and fluffy on the inside. The chicken is, perfectly moist. The outer, or the crust is extra crispy. It's seasoned right. Now, I can be happy as shit. And then I can also say in the same breath, oh, I should have, had a little more maple syrup or something, this, that, and the third, or maybe a little bit more black pepper, or, the waffle could have gone a little bit longer, so on and so forth. It's not that I'm not happy. I mean, I just made the best chicken and waffles of my life. But the next time I make chicken and waffles, I want to make the best chicken and waffles of my life +1.
Okay, so what you're saying is you're happy with what you got, but doesn't mean you still can't improve.
Exactly. It's not about, like, you guys, when you've discussed this line, I see it as in the context of me being down on something being negative, or noticing that something isn't quite, the way I want it. And that's certainly true, but it doesn't ruin my appreciation or my enjoyment of a thing. It's just that I'm aware of it. It's not, okay, this was 99%, so, but it didn't make that 1%, so, it's ruined. No, it's.
Well, there is different types of criticism, rather, and that's why I asked in the beginning, or do you positive, negative, constructive, destructive, practical? I mean, what kind of criticism do you lean toward? And from what we can tell, and you can correct us if we're wrong, you lean more towards negative criticism, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Again, nothing wrong with that, but to make sure we're understanding, there is, different types of it that, that could be just, explained differently. You know what I mean? Like your chicken and waffles thing. You could say it's the best damn chicken and waffles of my life, but I could have added more salt. I could have added more pepper. That is a negative way of looking at it. Or you could say it's the best chicken and waffles of my life. The waffle was fluffy and crispy on the outside. The chicken was really crispy on the skin and really moist on the inside. That's more of a positive criticism rather than a negative. You know what I mean?
And
I can only want chicken and waffles so much.
It makes you kind of hungry, right? It's been a while since I chicken and waffles, I'll tell you that.
I want some chicken and waffles now.
I guess as a point, sorry, Andrew, were you saying something?
Oh, I wasn't actually.
Oh, I guess as a point, it is a failing of mine as a critic that I do tend to be a little bit more on the negative side, and I'm just gonna blame my brain for that because, well, I think it was Andrew who said it. If nothing's wrong, nobody's sure you're doing any. Like, you only notice if the janitorial work at somewhere is bad if something's wrong. You only notice it because it's sticking out. The human brain is engineered to solve problems more than it is to appreciate things being good as it is now, up to the point where sometimes we even fucking create problems.
True that. I could see that.
Hey, you definitely need both sides, dude. You need a yin and a yang. Like, you can't just sit there and have positive all the time. Positive, positive, positive. If you have that, you're never going to notice any problems. Never notice any problems. It could be the end of the year someday. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you need the negative guy just as much as you need the positive guy in life.
Yeah, I agree, 100%.
Like, even if there is somebody out there going like 90%, and he's doing just damn near everything right, you know what I mean? Like, let's just say governor, he's running the state just terrifically. There's no homeless people. There's nothing. But he's messing up with, like, when it comes to like nuclear sewage or some shit like that. And if nobody corrects him for that mistake, he could end up leading to like poison the entire land. You know, like, you always gotta like keep your eye open for criticisms like that because of to help better us as human beings.
There is no work in human history that is not built on that which came before.
It's how we make things, man. It's how we move along.
And for every improvement, there was a snarky bastard who said, "You could do that better."
Yeah. Dude, there's very few things people have not re-innovated or remade better. You know what I mean? Like something like the hammer. Like, the hammer is just as good as it was, like, you know what I mean, like 50 years ago. I mean, you got a little self-improvements here and there, but it's basically like the same genuine idea. Like, it's basically just a hammer. You know what I mean? Like, but you can't do that with, like, bicycles. Like, go get a bicycle from 100 years ago to now. Like, I bet you it's like night and day.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that goes for the point we were making earlier that, there's, back then, to use your reference of the bicycles, back then, those bicycles were gold. You couldn't make a better one. So that was the best kind, you know what I mean? But over time, time evolves and technology evolves, and there's different and better ways to create things, and that's where we are at today. I mean, you could, I don't really know bicycles too much now, but you can grab the best mongoose or rhino or dyno, whatever it is, out there right now and say, oh, this is the best bike. The traction's the best. Not the trajectory, The force of the pedals is really good. The steering's like top notch, but 10, 20 years from now, you could have a bike that's 10 times better. So
it's got 10 different gears now.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? It's just a little different. I mean, back then, bicycles, they look cool. I mean, I watch American Pickers every once in a while. One of the things that they like is old bicycles and Schwinn or whatever it is, and compared to today's bikes, they look like shit. And the only reason why they're cool is because they're old and worth money. You know what I mean? They look like shit, though. In my opinion, I should say they look like shit.
They got like those old beach cruiser kind of looks. Like those look pretty dope. I stand by my point that the hammer was perfect at first made. Can't really self-improve a hammer. What are you gonna do? Put an end of a rocket at the other end, like power hammer.
That's a good point, though, Andrew. I guess that you just come up with the one thing that's really hard to criticize. Or how do you really make that better? Because it's still a hammer. You know what I mean? Do you make the head bigger? What's the point of that? Because a nail's head is only as big as as the other nail. I mean, there's really not different heads of a nail up to an extent. I know there is, but I mean the biggest head on a nail. How could you make the head of a hammer bigger than that? You know what I mean? You really can't. It's still going to do the damn job. The weight, I guess you could say, you can put more weight on the head to make it come to with more force. But I mean, again, it's just a hammer's got one job, and they've already perfected that one job. I mean, it's hard to come up with another way unless you're going to be able to create more force using your arm.
Well, on the subject of hammers, well, here, go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, go ahead. You're good.
All right. On the subject of hammers, is a given kind of hammer the right tool for the job? Because in blacksmithing, for example, you have like 4 or 5 different varieties of hammers. You've got your forging hammer, you've got your peening hammer, you've got your swedge, you've got all these different dies for a power hammer, all in order to do a certain job. And okay, for carpentry, yeah, that's it. Okay, you put a hitty thing on one end, you put a pulley thing on the other. Done.
Right, but for that job, I mean, for example, if you're doing carpentry for that matter, can you really have a better hammer than what they have now?
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
they kind of did like come out with like better versions of it. Like it's just still like what I meant was like the basic concept. You know what I mean? But like they do have carpenter hammers, man. They are like a little bit better than the other than your average household hammer. Like a little bit. I mean, like a little bit better though. Like it's not like the difference between like a computer in 1980 and the computer now. It's like it's not that much of a difference. You know what I mean?
Right.
Kind of your stoner thought of the day about hammers. So, John, how about when you're ready to tackle something, let's say in like politics or whatever, and like you're trying to defend something, like what's something that you like? What steps that you take to like make sure that you're not being biased?
First, make sure that the thing being said is actually true, that it did actually happen. I mean, that one should seem obvious, but it's not. The second thing is, try and look at the environment that might have prompted that decision, and what the reasoning, and that's it. Try and see what the reasoning would have been behind it. And if all of these things add up, then then I can weigh it based on, or those are the metrics that I weigh the decision against. Is it right for the time that the decision is being made? Is it being made in a certain kind of faith? Is it, or faith in the sense of, does the person genuinely believe what they're doing is for the better or for the worse, or whatever their approach is?
Okay.
That sounds like something simple, but it seems not for most people.
It is a skill.
He hit it on the nail when he said, first thing you do is make sure whatever is being brought to the table is actually true. Because nowadays, especially when you see politics, I mean, you can't just believe what they're saying. I mean, nowadays it's ridiculous because Donald Trump is the worst one. I mean, that motherfucker lies more than anybody I've ever knew in my life when it comes to politics. So fact-checking him on what he says is just a given. As soon as he says something, it's like, okay, let me actually look that up. You know what I mean? Because you can't just believe or just assume that one person is correct based on, their credentials or whatnot, because, nowadays politics is nothing more than, competitive, try to, fuck that guy, believe in me and whatever, and they'll say or do whatever it takes for you to kind of look at them or lean their way more than the other,
They do it to everybody, man. Even like somebody like Jordan Peterson, they'll like literally take like one sentence that he says, misconstrue that sentence, and put it into a clickbait thing that made it seem like he said the most racist thing ever said by anybody ever that has ever existed, and like all it really said that is there's mild differences between races or something.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Literally, like they have like it's basically news channels are trying, like a lot of news industries actually are just trying to stay alive. You know what I mean? Because they're like their industry's dying. Like the way the information gets out now is not the way it was back then. Like in 1970, if you wanted to get your news, you got that shit from like CNN or Fox, or you got that shit from like New York Times. Like it ain't like that anymore. There's so much news, like news being spread for free on the internet. Like a lot of these big industries are just struggling to stay alive, like I said. So they're trying to like resort to like anything to clickbait, anything that draws any kind of attention towards them. They'll say it doesn't. They don't even have like a biased side. You know what I mean? They're just like Fox. Like you jump on the Fox, like the only thing they want to do is like sit there and like back up Trump. If you jump on CNN, the only thing they want to do is attack him. Like literally, one thing will happen, you get two different like things, two different things that they're saying that it's about the very same thing that happened. Like you said, to make sure that thing that happened is at least first truth.
Yeah, and it's unfortunately sad to say. Yeah, there is, it's something you have to do anytime you're having any kind of political discussion or trying to have a political debate or argument. Is first and foremost, is what you're saying correct or not? You know what I mean? Because then of course, and I like how John put it. The next thing you look at is the environment that was made in. Yeah, that assumption or that, fact spoken. What kind of environment was it made in? And that's a good point to bring up too.
There's something I'd like to posit to you guys. Mostly that's it, just to get your opinions on that, because that's part of criticism too, is hearing other people's opinions. What do you guys honestly think concerning, like why we should have criticism or why we shouldn't have criticism, or what is the line, actually here, you guys have discussed the line a whole lot about, when just to accept something as it is. Why do you think that has value? Why do you think there should be a point where we just say, you know what, fuck it, it's good?
And you want to go first?
That's kind of a hard one to answer. I just go off about how I feel on it, man. You know what I mean? It's some kind of like subject. Like, let me put it this way: when it comes to like, that's a good way for me to explain it. When it comes to comic book movies, I have a way of viewing because they come out with them so damn fast anymore. Like, I just have a way of viewing it. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm going into it next, I have to tell myself that it's not going to be comic book accurate. Like, I have to convince myself that before I go in to see a comic book movie, because if I do not, I tend not to like it, because they don't really, like, let's face it, they were like not very very many movies stick to the comics. They're always off the wall. You know what I mean? So a lot of times I just try to like take that step back, like, hey, this is not going to be perfect, just accept it what it is. But at the same time, if it's that much, too much holes in the story or etc., then I'll just be like, this has to go. You know what I mean? Like, I always try to give myself like that bump back to recognize, like, hey, this is like not what you're gonna want it to be, but at the same time, like, you also can't just accept shit and be like, oh, it's okay, this shit's gonna turn into corn one day, like, I like that. It's a very fine line that you kind of like have to walk, just like between like sanity and sin. Between like being sane and insane, just that very same line. You have to just walk it delicately.
Part of my answer agrees with Andrew, by the way. I don't want to sound like I am not, able to criticize or wanting to criticize. More along the lines that I just accept the fact that nothing is perfect and nothing will be perfect. In the same sense, again, you can criticize anything. There's flaws in anything that you do or make or, think of. There's always going to be some kind of criticism you can give. But in my opinion, there is some kind of line you have to draw. For example, Andrew brought up the example of Mona Lisa. I mean, could you criticize it? I'm sure you could, but does it warrant that? No. It's a great piece. It's you know, it's historic. You know what I mean? There's some things that you can look at and say, you know what, it is good. Why? Because it's gone this long. It's been an historic piece or a historic point of history or whatever, to where it is what it is. You know what I mean? And I do believe that if you criticize too much, that could not demean somebody, but that could bring down their, not confidence per se, but that could diminish their will to want to do that thing again. You see what I'm saying? So, not that I don't think criticism isn't warranted in a lot of different things. I don't want to kind of devalue that, but there does come a point where, you know, for example, Andrew's comic books and, you know, the movies, you're not going to be able to make it completely identical to the other. You're not going to be able to make a movie just basically identical to the comic book. You just can't. You know what I mean? So you got to take it for what it is. I mean, you could, but again, times change, things change, and there's ways to make things bigger and better. I get that. But to sit there and say, oh, it didn't match up with the comic book, I don't like it, or to diminish what it is, I don't think that is right. It's Avengers, for example. You know, I know Andrew said he didn't like this one because whether it didn't match up with what the comic book said or whatever. I thought it was a great freaking movie. Outside the comic books, it was a great freaking movie. It had good action, had good graphics, good acting. All the actors did a really good job. I don't think you could have picked anybody to do any better with each one of their roles. So my point is, I have no problem criticizing, but there are some things that just don't warrant it. You know what I mean? That they are as good as they're going to get. And whether it was because it was out of their time, like, you know, for example, the Mona Lisa, obviously you can probably make something 10 times better than that nowadays because of the, you know, difference of technology we have, of course, more precision and et cetera. But do I think that it warrants it? No. It's creative and it's, you know, an historic piece. I don't think it warrants criticism at this point. That's my answer.
You ain't for something for what it is, this kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Now, again, I'm not trying to say I'm not trying to devalue the point of criticizing. I'm really not, because I do believe that criticism is important for everything and everybody, because that's how you yourself. But there are some things. For example, here's a good example. You got a 7, 8-year-old kid drawing a picture. In your mind, obviously, you know they could have done better, right? Well, whatever they drew, could have done better. But are you going to tell the kid, hey, you could have made that tree a lot better? No, you're going to take it for what it is. It was a damn tree, kid. Good job. You know what I mean?
Okay, you do, man. Tough love.
Well, you could go that route too, but that kid might just, you know, break its self-esteem. You know what I mean? There does come a point, I believe, and this is just my opinion, there's times where it warrants it more than others. I'm not saying that in the future you couldn't criticize it. What I am saying, times where it warrants it.
Throw a ball like a girl. That's how I got better, man. If I had to deal with it, so does everybody else.
So based on our conversation, John, I assume that for you, that there really is no line that you draw. There really is nothing that you can say that really won't warrant criticism at this point, right?
Right. And I would like to just kind of say I disagree with your approaches. That's it. It's not just saying, you know, this could be done better, this could be done worse, but the primary value in it is thinking about it. Why could it be better? Why, you know, was it done worse? You know, like to bring up your example with the kid. Okay, now if let's just say, you know, I'm genuinely going to criticize a small child's drawing. You know, I don't want to break this kid's heart because, you know, I don't want to break this kid's heart. I'm a monster, not a complete idiot or asshole. You know, so instead of telling them, oh, you know, the leaves don't look realistic or the trunk doesn't look realistic, I'm gonna say, oh, I like what you did with the leaves here. You know, they look real, or I like how they're moving with how you got it moving with the wind, or oh, you know, that trunk, it's really kind of skinny, but yeah, you know, it looks like a lot of these other trees I've seen. You know, I'm not gonna use criticism to tear someone down. In that case, I'm going to tell them why they did good. And that's it. It's because I sat there, I looked at it, and I thought about it. And that's really just kind of the more important thing.
Okay, so that's a good point to
like,
make.
Kid, your brother did 10 times better.
So it's a good point to make that you say, though, John, is you're in that case, in that reference of a small child in their drawings, you would use positive criticism more than negative criticism with that reference.
Well, that's it. The main thing I want to get across is stop and fucking think. Always. Doesn't matter if it's in your life, if it's, a movie you like or a video game you like, just stop and think. That's the most important thing.
Good.
Stop and fucking think.
I think that's a great sentence to leave this podcast off on. You have been listening to the 5th episode of JNA Podcast. Make sure that you like, make sure you subscribe, and make sure you guys be nice to each other out there. The world's already hell. No reason to make it any worse.
Think critically.
Critically.